The first thing that I want to go over is that you need to change some things in your workbook. I want you to look for the Lesson 8-1 Day 2, and you're going to look for the page that looks like this. There were other questions that asked you to name all the parallel lines, all the skew lines, and so on and so forth. I'd like you to change those questions to these 4 questions, please. So, just like always, take a minute, pause the video, write down the problems, and when you're ready, start the video and we'll get moving. Alright, now that you're back, today we're going to talk about the different types of lines. We talked about what makes a line, but now we're going to talk about the different classifications of lines. We're going to be bouncing back and forth between your vocabulary and your notes. So it might be helpful to maybe put a piece of paper or keep your finger on your vocabulary page to make it easier to flip back and forth between the two. Alright, to start off, we have intersecting lines. Intersecting lines are lines that have exactly 1 point in common. The reason they have only 1 point in common is because if a line curves, it is no longer considered a line. It has to be straight. Even though this is on a diagonal, it is still a straight line. If it were to curve and come back around and intersect this line a second time, it's no longer a line. So you'll notice here's your definition, here's your example. At any point in time, don't hesitate to pause the movie, make sure you get everything written down, and get your examples drawn. It's very important for this chapter that you take all the notes you can and to have all your vocabulary terms correct. Okay, then we're going to go to the intersecting lines notes page. We're going to draw intersecting lines. So for this one, we are going to draw line AE right here and line DC, and they're going to intersect at point B. When we read this, we read it and say line AE intersects line DC at point B. This is just how we would read it. Now to write it, we like to make things as short and simple as possible in math. So what we do is we use our symbols for line to shorten it up as much as we can. However, in this case, intersect doesn't have a symbol, so we have to use the word, but it still reads the same. Line AE intersects line DC. Okay, back to the vocab. Parallel lines. Parallel lines are lines that have no points in common. The double L symbol is used to label parallel lines. Now these aren't double L's, they're just 2 straight lines, but I like to remember that the 2 double L's, or the double L's, are the double L's in parallel. So the symbol matches what's in the word. It's also important to note that parallel lines are always the same distance apart. They never get closer together. If they were to get closer together, that would mean at some point the lines would have to intersect, and making them no longer parallel lines. So to make a set of lines parallel, again, no points in common, same distance apart, and they have to be on the same plane. Okay, parallel lines, to draw them, we just draw line AE and line DC. To help you draw lines, it's nice to maybe have a ruler or the straight edge of a protractor to help make those lines nice and straight. When we read this, we say that line AE is parallel to line DC. To write it, again, we use our line symbols. Line AE is parallel to line DC. See how we make it nice, short and sweet? Just make sure to use the correct symbol in the middle. Alright, back to your vocabulary. 2 down, 2 to go. Perpendicular lines. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect to form right angles. The symbol upside down T is used to label perpendicular lines. You'll notice that the lines make four right angles. That's what perpendicular lines do. Even if the lines were to stop and just make this upside down T like you see here, you have to imagine that the line would still go through and it would still make two 90-degree angles down on the bottom. Alright, again, it'd be nice to use your straight edge here to make it a little bit easier to draw. We have line AE and line CD, and they are perpendicular lines. To help us note that they are perpendicular lines, we should put at least one square inside of our lines. To read this, we would say line AE is perpendicular to line DC. To write this, we would use our line symbols. So line AE is perpendicular to line DC. Back to your vocabulary. Skew lines. Now for this one, I did the drawing in your vocabulary for you because it is a three-dimensional figure. This is the only time you'll be able to find skew lines is when you have a three-dimensional figure or when you have separate planes, because skew lines are lines that lie in different planes. They are neither parallel nor intersecting. So skew lines will never touch, just like parallel lines never touch. However, skew lines are not always the same distance apart. That's what makes them very different from parallel lines. They get further apart from one another, but because they're on separate planes, they never intersect. So we needed to give them a different classification. Okay, again, I did the drawing for you for skew lines. So to read this, we would say line AB and EF are skew. And since there's no symbol for skew, the only way to shorten this up is to use our line symbol and say that line AB and line EF are skew. Now, a lot of times students ask why this is important. When you look at a map, if your friend tells you that she lives on Grand Avenue, okay, we'll say her house is on the corner, and she tells you that Senator Street runs parallel to Grand Avenue. Well, if you are on Senator Street and you know that it runs parallel to Grand Avenue, you know that there is no way to get from where you are to Grand Avenue without making a turn. And the reason that is because parallel lines never intersect. So if the streets never intersect, you have to use another street, in this case East 11th Street, to get to your friend's house. However, if your friend lives on Linden Avenue and you are driving down East Street, you know that you can get to your friend's house because East Street and Linden Avenue do intersect. Alright, on to your last page. For the last part of your lesson, you are going to solve these four problems. I'll do the first one with you to help you out and show you what I'm looking for. So we're going to name all the lines that are parallel to line PQ. It might be helpful for you to get a pencil and extend the line that you're looking at or make it a little bit bolder, anything to make it catch your eye. So in this case, I'm going to use a red line to show me where line PQ is. And I want all the lines that are parallel to PQ. This means they have to be the same distance apart and never touch and on the same plane. So if I take a look at line SR, I note that they're the same distance apart no matter where I am on the line, and they never touch, meaning that we can conclude that line SR is a line that is parallel to line PQ. And we can do this by trial and error. If I look at line UQ and I go up and down, I notice that the two lines do end up intersecting, which is a big no-no if we're looking for parallel lines. So I know that line UQ is not a possibility. No big deal. We just try again. So I go down here and I look at line TU. Line TU and line PQ are always the same distance apart. They never touch. They're on the same plane. So line TU is another line that is parallel to line PQ. Last but not least, we look at line WV. So when you're finding parallel lines, typically you're going to look for lines that all run the same direction. So PQ runs from left to right, so any line that runs up and down isn't going to be a line that is parallel because they're not going to be going the same direction, they're not going to be the same distance apart, meaning they cannot be parallel. Okay, so line WV, same distance apart, never intersecting. We can conclude line WV is parallel to line PQ. Alright, so now you have 3 more problems that you need to solve. We'll be going over these at the start of class tomorrow, so make sure to do your best. And if you have any questions, make sure to come with them. It might be helpful to write them down on the bottom.